This is try number 2. We tried last night and had all kinds of technical difficulties, but we're so fortunate to have back with us here Dave Huguenel. And he is a media strategist and consultant, former Trump war room guy, and knows Oregon well, but also knows the national scene well, and general bon vivant. From hailing from, I can see you got the LSU hat, so I thought I'd throw in a little bon vivant there, a little French, little bit extra there.
Laissez le bon temps rouler.
That's right. Let the good times roll in Baton Rouge. Or what part of Louisiana?
So I was born in Metairie, which is a suburb of New Orleans. Think of it as like what Hillsborough is to Portland.
Yeah,
sort of. And then, but lived in Baton Rouge, lived in New Orleans, kind of like that southeastern area. That's where most of my family's kind of based. So got a lot of Cajun in my family, probably a little more Cajun than straight up New Orleans. But I've got relatives that still speak a little French, all that sort of stuff. I can't. Besides laissez bon temps rouler, you got every word, every French word is in that sentence.
Well, and there is a correct way, I believe, to pronounce New Orleans. It's New Orleans, something like that.
Well, so if you're from New Orleans, you just say it's New Orleans.
Yeah.
So like that's how we pronounce it. We will make fun of you if you say New Orleans.
New
Orleans, like you're gonna get ribbed for that one. Also, if you're from out of state and you're trying to say Nolans, like which is kind of like how we would say New Orleans, because I don't really have a New Orleans accent, like the rest of my family does. But if someone from out of state comes in and say, hey, like I'm in Nolans, like we're gonna pick on you a little bit.
But don't try so hard.
Good news is we'll feed you well while we're making fun of you.
Yeah, so, you will be well fed, and there will probably be plenty to drink and all kinds of stuff like that. So maybe some beads, but all depends, right?
That's right.
Some good music. But well, I gotta come visit you there sometime, because that would actually be a lot of fun. And Louisiana is one of these states that actually has taken, it's been, I don't want to say a swing state, because technically it's kind of conservative Republican, but then you elect Democrats quite often too.
There's a uniqueness to the state. It's one of, if not the only state that I think is majority Catholic. It's certainly the only state in the South that's majority Catholic.
Yeah.
So there's a uniqueness there in terms of our culture. I would argue that Louisiana is really 3 different states in one. You have Northern Louisiana, which if you're in Northern Louisiana, Shreveport, Monroe, that feels very much like Mississippi or East Texas or Southern Arkansas. Like culturally, it feels more like what you would think of as the South up there.
Yeah.
Southwest Louisiana, Acadiana, so to speak. That's more Cajun country. So think like Swamp People on the History Channel. That's where it's like. That's where all that sort of stuff shot.
Yeah.
It's socially conservative, fiscally liberal is kind of the way to think about that area. And then you have Southeast Louisiana, where I'm from, which is a little bit more metropolitan because of New Orleans and Baton Rouge. Certainly, especially since Katrina in 2005, you've had a lot of folks kind of migrate into those cities for job opportunities and other issues. So those are 2 very liberal sort of pockets there too, and you've got sort of purplish to reddish suburbs around them, and those kind of act a little bit more like the rest of the country. So there are but we also just have characters that run for office in Louisiana too, and I think that's the other thing. I mean, there's the infamous election between Edward Edwards, who eventually was indicted and went to jail. It was a three-term governor. And then David Duke, that ran against him in that election, who was a former leader of the KKK. And it was actually an elected state representative while he was a member of the KKK. And he almost won the governor's race. We've also had Bobby Jindal elected as governor. David
Duke hails from Louisiana, right?
Yeah. Yeah. He is from an area called Bucktown, not too far from where I grew up. So there's there's an infamous bumper sticker because that election was in 1991. It's a really great book, by the way, called The Last Hayride, that really kind of dives into that election where you had this obvious criminal with Edwin Edwards as the Democrat and a racist KKK member in David Duke, and that was the choice that voters had. You had to vote for one or the other in the runoff. And so Edwin Edwards actually put out a bumper sticker that said, "Vote for the crook, it's important." Like, he leaned into his criminality and, in his actual campaign. So Louisiana just has these very unique elections. It's one of the reasons I'm kind of glad that that's where I got my start in politics. It is actually, we have convicted more politicians per capita than any other state in the country for corruption. It's a very corrupt state historically. We have machine politics, much like New Jersey or Chicago or New York, just kind of our own sort of Louisiana flavor. So cutting your teeth in Louisiana politics is actually a really good stepping stone to kind of go out to other states in the world. So kind of grateful that I got to start there.
Well, it is. That's the place with the guy that had the money in the freezer.
Yep.
As well. And you had the hapless mayor of New Orleans during Katrina. You had that one governor that was during Katrina who was kind of, I don't know what to do. And no, it's and you've got a runoff system that you think it's over on election day, but maybe it's not sometimes.
Yep. Yeah, and it's a very interesting runoff system where, I mean, there's other states that have runoffs. Ours is the term that most people use is a jungle primary. So all Republicans and Democrats run at the same time together on the same ballot for what you would consider probably a primary. And then if someone gets a majority, they're automatically elected. There's no second election. If no one gets a majority,
50% plus one. We have that for local offices out here.
So then the top two will go. What's interesting about our runoff system, though, is the runoff is 30 days after the election. So we have our general, what we call our general election, what you would consider a primary, in October. And then our runoff is in November. So it is a very short, one of the most stressful campaigns that you could ever work on is a runoff campaign in Louisiana, because you're starting from scratch after a brutal general election, and you have 30 days to run a full campaign, to raise money, to get ads made, to get messaging, to get voters out, to get your grassroots going. It's a tough slog. And I will tell you this, there's a lot I miss about Louisiana. I do not miss working on runoffs.
Well, leaning into criminality and how elections work just takes us to the topic du jour, which is Joe Biden and the debate last week. And of course, the fact that they're also trying, President Trump has also been convicted, so to speak, of something we're not really sure what it is, but it's something that a jury in New York apparently agreed enough so that a judge could declare him guilty of a bunch of counts of accounting errors. And so based on the testimony of a convicted felon perjurer, and a porn star, I mean, it almost seems like maybe Louisiana politics has gone national when you listen to all that. But last Thursday was a seminal moment in the campaign, because up until that point, there had been this illusion that somehow had been created for a great many people, not me, not you, but for many people, that Joe Biden had his act together and he's sharp as a tack, as the media tried to repeat repeatedly for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then he got up there and he absolutely severely damaged himself, to put it mildly, in his debate performance, which I believe he said yesterday he attributed, in addition to the 8 other excuses, he had a cold. He had been traveling internationally a lot, even though he had been not traveling for almost 6 or 8 days or something, just doing debate prep, lockdown. I don't know where he was, Camp David or someplace. and that he actually said in his own words that he almost fell asleep during the debate. He said that yesterday, but that he didn't need to say how bad it was because everybody finally saw it. And there's Democrat donors which they're going ballistic, saying you guys lied to us, as if you couldn't see the clues before this. And there's also members of Congress, including one just north of where we are here, Marie Gluskamp Perez, who's on one of those frontline DCCC people, just like Val Hoyle. Val's been noticeably silent, though, in the last few days. But Marie Gluskamp Perez, along with 2 other members of Congress, said they're questioning whether Biden should stay on the ticket and openly declaring that he can't beat Trump in November. And almost all the left-wing commentators, at least right after the debate and for several days afterwards, were saying the same thing. Like, that's it. He's toast. And Trump, I don't know if Trump put in the tour de force debate performance. He was Trump. And he was actually pretty restrained in terms of like people expecting to be over the top. I think he was like in the split screen camera thing.
Yeah.
He was pretty reasonable and handled that well. But he just did what he did, and he went after the super low-hanging fruit. But Biden was almost unintelligible at times. I read somebody saying something that I thought, which is, I can't understand them, and I need subtitles. What's happening now? Because there's a lot of discussion going on.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack after what happened last Thursday. I mean, just to repeat, so your listeners know you and I are on the same page. There's no way, and even the Biden campaign has had to acknowledge that was a terrible performance by Biden. Usually after a debate, you claim victory no matter what.
Right.
This is one of the few instances where even the guy that clearly lost can't even figure out a way to spin it like this was like that it was okay.
Well, and the entire media is saying the same thing. Usually the
Right.
media is divided, right? And then
Right.
you're cheering for the guy on your team. There isn't a division in the media, right?
So that is that also, so like that's the atmosphere we're kind of working in, where this kind of makes everything a bit of a horse of a different color. Like even the Biden campaign is saying that wasn't good. Normally, if you're on a campaign, you spin why it was good, right? You're seeing none of that right now.
Spin till you win.
Right. The other thing, and I was joking about this with you the other day, Kevin. You and I have done a few of these shows, and you have talked about the possibility of Biden stepping down. And I've kind of consistently said, like, no, that's not going to happen. You're respectfully, Kevin, I think you're kind of crazy. Here's all the reason they can't. My first reaction when I saw that debate on Thursday was, holy cow, Kevin might be right, and I might be wrong.
Oh my God.
I was selfishly, I was like, I don't like being wrong. I might be wrong now. Kevin might be correct. So that was another reaction. Another thing to unpack before we kind of get into the replacement and all that sort of stuff is I want to focus on, everyone's focused on Biden's performance and his inability to perform as a candidate, which is valid, and that's an important discussion to have. The discussion that's not happening, that I think has to be acknowledged, is that what you've seen post debate is a bad performance by his campaign itself, the actual infrastructure around him. So,
yes, and isn't it true that a lot of the people that are trying to distract from the Joe Biden performance, they're also starting to talk. Well, they're saying actually he was set up or let down by his staff. Some staff is attacking other staff, like senior staff, especially close to Jill Biden, who apparently has not acknowledged that it was a poor performance. She said, well, he answered every question. The senior staff, the junior staff are blaming the senior staff for hiding the truth from them. Again, I don't even know how that's possible, but there's a lot of blame going around amongst campaigns.
Well, and I'll give one example that's, as someone that has worked on a presidential campaign before, right? Usually presidential campaigns are relatively big operations. I mean, the biggest operation in American politics, right? Yeah. And you typically have a lot of different people who are tasked with different things. And one of the tasks that you usually have is there's usually some organization within a presidential campaign, and their job is to communicate with elected officials of your party, specifically Democratic congressmen and congresswomen, governors, things like that, and their political teams. So those elected officials know what to say, and they know what spin to offer, right?
Yeah.
What you've seen come out of Perez in Washington 3, the Democratic nominee in Colorado 3, you saw it with Jamie Golden up in Maine. You're seeing all of these Democrat congressmen that are coming out with their own messaging that's anti-Biden at this point, right? It can't be said. That to me shows that there is a bad disconnect between whatever communication vessel there is within the Biden campaign to talk to these elected officials and the elected officials themselves. So there is strong evidence that not only did Biden, which Thursday and the aftermath has shown me, is that yes, Biden is a bad candidate. We already knew that.
Yeah.
What I didn't know until after Thursday is Biden has a bad campaign around him too.
Yeah.
Like that has to also be recognized. They are doing things that are making the situation worse than it should be.
Well, and just like we're not sure at times who's running the country, because the thing on Thursday convinced everybody who was in any shadow of a doubt who's actually running the country. It's not Joe Biden. Right. Somebody is making all these decisions and literally deciding what he's going to do, what his schedule is, what he's going to say, how he's going to say it, when he's going to say it, if he's going to say it, and the question now is who's running his campaign as well, and it would seem to be some of the same people. I've been hearing names that are the top gatekeepers for Jill Biden are the ones that are actually running the show, because she has pretty much all the power and influence to he is. What was that thing in the big fat Greek wedding? The man is the head of the household. Mm-hmm. The woman is the neck, and she can point him wherever she wants. Right. That's what she is. She is actually running the country to the extent that she runs. She says Joe Biden's doing this and he's not doing that. That's what happens.
Well, and I think Biden, and there's some obvious truth to that, but I mean, historically, you've seen too that the way that Joe Biden has operated is that he has a very insular structure with his immediate family around him, right? Whether it's his wife Bill, his son Hunter, his late son Beau. There's been plenty of times in his U.S. Senate runs and his prior presidential runs where his family is very much in control and kind of has final say on a lot of things,
including Hunter. Right? He was in on the debate prep, and he's in on all the post.
I think my understanding, if I saw the reporting correctly, is that he was at the Camp David meeting after the debate as well. So, there's so you have that. I guess what I'm hung up on, and this is good news if you're a Republican candidate out there, is as someone that works on campaigns, like I always kind of pay attention to this sort of behind the scenes competition. Who's running the better campaign? Is it Trump? Is it Biden? Yep. And it is clear to me that now more than ever, the Trump campaign has a much better, much more regimented, much smarter operation than the Biden campaign has. Take the candidates out of it, right? And just say the candidates are just put candidate A, candidate B, which one's doing a better job? The Trump campaign and its infrastructure are just light years ahead of where the Biden campaign is. Biden's team, just based on what's happened over the last few days, it might be one of the worst presidential campaigns in recent memory. I mean, we're talking, I don't know, like John McCain 2000 primary bad. It's not, it's not good.
Well, and isn't it true that the one advantage that Biden did have has evaporated, which was the money advantage that he had a few months ago. Once the conviction with the what's the name of it? The thing in New York with the hush payment,
hush money,
hush money thing. Which ironically, hush money itself was not illegal at all. So they created a crime on top of that, and it was done so badly. It was so flimsy. It was so really criticized by that it built and built and built, and then it turned into a massive fundraising windfall for Trump. It was like since that verdict, I think he's raised like $300 million.
Yep.
Which is an enormous sum in a short period of time. That's more than presidential campaigns raised in their entire campaign 20 years ago.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and again, I think to give your listeners and your viewers some perspective on those numbers too, someone that worked on the campaign 4 years ago, I can tell you two things that we didn't have that the Trump campaign has now. A, we were losing in every poll to Joe Biden at this point, pretty clearly, pretty consistent.
And that had been true. You and I have talked about this before. That had been true starting like in 2019, and it was never changed before Election Day.
No, exactly. And so there's that aspect of it, and then the second thing is we never had a cash advantage. We were, or especially at this point, I think we were consistently kind of being outraised, outspent. We were having trouble, funding TV ads in places like Georgia and Pennsylvania and that sort of stuff. Both of those things are flipped. Trump is winning in all of these national polls and all these battleground polls that matter even more. Trump is up in Georgia. He's up in Pennsylvania. You're seeing, Gretchen Whitmer announced that like Biden can't win Michigan. That's insane, right? And
she and Gavin Newsom are absolutely doing everything they can to come up with some other answer than they are interested in the job. They are constantly saying that they support him. It's almost like they've gone to the extreme, the absurd extreme. They're not even questioning it's like when they say, and this is political advice. It's like, I forget what movie once talked about this, but don't just don't just mildly. It was, I think it was that Harrison Ford, what's the movie that, where he was Patriot Games, I think it was, when you say, don't just say that person's a friend of mine. It says he's an amazing friend of mine. Just go all the way to the point where people don't have anywhere to go. They can't question your motives. They can't. And so Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, Michelle Obama doesn't have to say anything because she's not a real candidate in that sense. She's an appendage of Barack Obama, or vice versa. And then, of course, Kamala Harris did an interview after the debate and said she didn't want to talk about the debate, which is hilarious, isn't it?
Yeah. No, it is. I think Democrats are obviously in disarray. The one thing that I think is going to be interesting, and I saw this just before we jumped on. Biden put out a pretty firm statement on a campaign call he did just an hour or two ago, making it very clear he has no plans to get out of this race. He has no plans of stepping down. He continues to plan to be president and run for president, which makes all this other talk around him almost moot. If Biden doesn't want to be if Biden wants to be the nominee, there are very, very few options, if any at all, to change that, because he has the delegates, that are bound to him at the Democratic National Convention. He has a ton of institutional advantages that I don't think will allow him to get dislodged in any way. So
his money is his, right? So I don't know what he can do if he decided not to run. It would really depend on what would happen after that. If it's like Kamala Harris, who's technically on the ticket, I guess. But campaign finance wise, you can't just say, here's several $100 million, whoever runs. I don't think it works that way, does it?
So, when it comes to campaign finance, there's always ways to move money around. Look at Ron DeSantis, when he ran for president, right? He had 80 million something, I think, in his campaign for governor. He was able to transfer that over to a super PAC completely legally with Never Back Down, and they were able to spend that money because he couldn't spend that 80 million on directly for his presidential campaign. I'm sure there's a mechanism where if there's money in a bank account, Democrats will figure out a legal way to spend it to support their nominee. If it's Kamala, maybe it's a little bit easier than if it's somebody else, obviously, if it stays. But all that said, if Biden's saying, I'm not going to get out, I just don't see a world where he is not the nominee.
Now, And you and I know conventions really well. And I was actually on the rules committee in 2012 when people were trying to get rules changed so that um, Ron Paul could
Yep.
be at least brought up in the nomination, thinking that maybe they could pull something, and that Mitt Romney wouldn't be. And I learned the intricacies of the rules, both the RNC rules, but also states bind these delegates. Oregon law actually technically binds delegates for, I think, at least two, the first two rounds of voting. And if you get enough votes in the first round, you're the nominee, right? So it's hard to see it going past one round unless the party, the national party, changes their rules and maybe tries to do something. And some people are saying that is an avenue to this, the insiders. And then the other one is playing hardball with Joe Biden. I heard several people talking about the 25th Amendment, which is sort of, it would remove him from office. It would be catastrophic for his campaign to be removed as president or even to face a vote, because this would push it to Congress ultimately. The cabinet, I think it's the vice president and the majority of the cabinet, can say not fit for office. His powers are transferred to the vice president, and within 4 days, they have to resolve whether Biden contests it, and then the people that the majority of the cabinet plus the vice president can say if they just still disagree with the president at that point, it actually forces a vote under the 25th Amendment. I think it's Section 4 of Congress. And if Congress agrees with the cabinet by a majority vote, he's out. And if they were to just threaten to do that, then he would probably have to, they say, you can continue to be president for 7 more months, but you must let go of your delegates. They could do that if they're truly going, because they want to give their team a chance to win. And they're increasingly saying that it isn't just about Biden's fitness for office and the belief that he can serve 4 more years. That doesn't even seem like a debate now. Like, people aren't even, no one can really say that and be taken seriously. It's, can he win in the fall? Period.
Right. I guess here's. I mean, obviously, all of that is possible.
He always was just a vehicle, right? He always was just a vehicle. He was never like the great candidate.
Yeah, obviously, I struggle with what the probability of it is, and part of the reason I struggle with the probability on the 25th Amendment, and I don't know if Democrats are thinking about it this way, but they should. For the last 3.5 years, Democrats have branded themselves as the defenders of democracy. Democracy. Ever since January 6th, we have to stop Trump because democracy. All the silly talking points we hear about from Democrats.
Yeah.
If they were to use the 25th Amendment, what they would be doing is they would be usurping and removing a duly elected president of the United States without, and foregoing the will of the voters.
And worse yet, handing the reins to somebody that's even lower in the polls.
And how are you defending democracy if you are using a never before used constitutional amendment to remove a sitting president and put in somebody that has not been on the ballot in a Democratic primary in any state in this country? That is, and take just the 25th Amendment aside. Let's just say that there's a discussion about removing him as the nominee as the convention. You've had Democratic primaries all across this country for the last 7 months, while it was certainly an advantage to Biden, there were places where Democrats could and did run against him. And Biden won those primaries soundly, 75, 80% of the vote, sometimes 90% of the vote in some of these states.
But one thing about those primaries, and a lot of people were saying this immediately after the debate, is the Democrats already disenfranchised millions and millions of Democrat primary voters because those primaries literally had no other option. There was like a couple of states where there was somebody, like in Oregon, we had Marianne Williamson.
Sure.
And in Minnesota, we had that one congressman or whatever. But they didn't really, there wasn't a competition. They didn't have a choice. And so they were railroaded. And a lot of them already feel like, you know what? We we got screwed because we didn't get the truth. Many of them were watching MSNBC and never heard the truth.
Right.
And then when it becomes obvious and undeniable, they're screwed. They don't have any power to change what happened anymore.
You're 100% correct. I mean, yes, like this is true of most incumbent elections for president, right? I mean, it's not a level playing field. The incumbent is given a lot of advantages,
and the party's allowed to do that,
and the party is allowed to do that. Like, these are legal advantages that they're able to create, on the ballot for these primaries for the incumbent president. So sure, there are some people that probably felt disenfranchised in the Democratic Party because of that. That said, it still doesn't change the fact that we went through a democratic process, and as a country, and out of that process came two presumptive nominees, Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And what Democrats are now talking about is saying we're going to ignore what millions of Democrats have said across this country. We're going to remove Joe Biden and put someone in of our choosing.
Yeah,
that is extremely undemocratic, anti-democratic. And if you're the Democratic Party and part of your branding and messaging is you're the defenders of democracy, how can you hold that branding in one hand while talking about removing a nominee and using the 25th Amendment in another?
It creates there isn't really a good scenario for them because it already looks bad. That would probably make it look worse, especially to swing voters. But then I would add to that people already feel like they've been lied to. Biden was trying to make an issue of what he was saying were Trump's lies. And I find when they talk about Trump and they claim he's lying, in almost every instance I've ever looked at, it's just where Trump engages in hyperbole, maybe overstates a statistic, but isn't fundamentally wrong with what he's saying. And it actually just states his opinion. And they're like, there's no such thing as false opinion. We joke about that on this show. False opinion doesn't exist. If it's your opinion, it's your opinion. If you want to criticize someone's opinion, it's not based in fact, that's fine. But Joe Biden literally is telling massive whoppers that are provably false repeatedly. And then now he says inane things like we have to beat Medicare. We have to beat it or defeat it or something like that he said during the debate. And he still claims things like his son died in Iraq. It's not true. Right. Claims about himself. And it's just replete with things which are just, it's either due to memory failures or just the guy doesn't even know what the truth is, or he knows he's lying and he just figures no one will say anything about it. And so he's stuck between a rock and a hard place rhetorically, isn't he?
He absolutely is. I mean, look, the end of the day, if you're Joe Biden, I mean, you've got, the wagons are being circled, right? I mean, you've got Democrat governors, calling for you to step down. You've got Democrat congressmen, congresswomen telling you to step down, and not just any, like ones that are in swing key districts that like Democrats either need to hold or win if they have any hope of getting majority this November. And equally, if not more importantly, you've got donors that are very upset. And, campaigns, even good campaigns, can't function without money. Like, you have to have donors involved. And how do you turn and I think the other thing to point out too is donors were already upset with the Biden campaign before the debate. They were very upset that that Biden had lost this campaign cash advantage to Trump. There was some reporting over that. So now you have this 1-2 punch where they're upset that in the donor, from the perspective of Democrat donors, the financials of the Biden campaign had been mismanaged. So now they're at a deficit to the Trump campaign. And then just a week or two later, you have this disastrous debate. If you are a donor and the Biden campaign calls you asking for more cash, like, you've got to have, and they seem to have, some serious questions of like, well, before I give you another red cent, you got to tell me, like, what are you guys doing to right this ship? And as of today, the Biden campaign just doesn't seem to have a good answer for him.
No, and a lot of Democrats that have been saying, and media personalities, which are Democrats, are saying, look, just hold a press conference. Go up, hold a press conference, say, I'm going to stay for 2 hours, answer every question until we're done, and reassure everybody that I got my act together. They have not done that. They have not even attempted that. He hasn't done an open interview in a very long time, and actually, that might be as or worse than the debate situation, because then he wouldn't even have Trump to take up some of the time or to attack. He would just have to answer questions, all of which are going to be about the questions he doesn't want to answer and has avoided: Hunter Biden, criminality, his fitness for office, all of the prospects for winning his campaign, and then a whole slew of issues that he's underwater on inflation and the border. And for 2 hours, they said, well, if he just did that, then we would all go back to being happy and start donating again. That's what one major donor apparently said. And you could put this in the rearview mirror and say it was what Nancy Pelosi called an episode, I think, rather than a condition, because she's the one who offered. We don't know which one it is yet. This is Nancy Pelosi, who sat across from Biden in congressional negotiations repeatedly for years, and has a pretty good idea of just what his condition is.
You know. Well, and the other thing I'd point out too, in terms of people calling for Biden to do like a press conference where he answers any question, that sort of stuff, I'll say this: I'll donate to Biden today if he promises to do another open press conference.
Yeah, guarantee. Exactly.
I would love that. And any Republican should be rooting for him to get.
We should fund his press conferences. That's right.
We should. I mean, because and the reason that if you're the Biden campaign, that's one of the last things you want to do. The last open press conference he had, if I recall correctly, was the one where he got up and confused the leaders of Egypt and Mexico and the borders in the Mexican and the Egyptian border. It was an absolute train wreck of a press conference.
And then he just walks out, usually at the end, somewhat lost. And then he walks out with people shouting cogent questions to him, not from the conservative media, but from the liberal media. Like, what about this? What about that? And he's like, he just walks out.
I don't even know if I can say
one time he gave that weird smile. Like, remember that?
I mean, the B-roll footage you get of Biden, like post press conferences, is media consultant gold. So these are for all sorts of stuff. But no, because I don't even know if he walks off stage. He kind of like meanders. Like he just kind of like it's like he's like lost in a maze with no walls.
Yeah, he reminds me of a character on the Carol Burnett show that Tim Conway played called Mr. Tudball. That's kind of where he kind of shuffles his way and meandering towards an eventual exit from the room. And that was a hilarious comedic skit, but Biden is the real thing. Like, he's comedy gold too. And in fact, the latest thing, and I think I told you about this yesterday, is the so-called, what they're calling on Fox News, the Bronze Brandon. It's Joe Biden's spray tan that they tried because they blamed CNN's makeup artist for screwing up Joe Biden's appearance, making him look too ghostly white. And I guess if you're already ghostly white, if somebody just does makeup on you, you probably are still ghostly white. But they blamed the CNN makeup artist. Yeah. So what they did just a couple days later, a day or two later, is they spray tanned him and he looks orange, which is fascinating because who is it that they always say looks orange and is a terrible guy and therefore should be quite unelectable?
Right. Well, look, I'll say this: if there's any Democrat or any Biden campaign staffers that are watching right now, and they're trying to figure out what to do, like with their donors, just know that you have one new donor right here. If you promise to do another one of those press conferences, I will max out to the Biden campaign today. If you promise to do a 45-minute press conference with the guy where reporters can ask any question, because that is a good ROI in that investment, in my opinion, for me.
I would consider it, as long as the format isn't, we're going to pick 5 people that are going to ask us softball questions. They already told us what they are. And then we're going to not answer. He's going to spend, 10 minutes answering each question, run out the clock, and then shuffle off the stage. I would be concerned about format, but I do want him to have his spray tan for this press conference. I think that's a must-have.
I don't even know if there's such a thing as a softball question for Biden anymore. A softball question that is easy to answer. Biden can't tell you what time of day it is right now.
No, because usually he doesn't need to know because somebody only has him operating about 25% of the day. And it's true. He operates from like 10 to 2 and then he heads for a nap. But they put a lid on him each day because he actually lacks the endurance, which is what we
Right.
saw
Right.
the other day. And he did go to a rally after the debate, which was a weird sort of version of the world that it's like an alternate universe where Joe Biden and Jill Biden exist. I got a kick out of the report that there was a presidential debate watch, and I don't know what they expected to be the debate watch, how it was going to make them feel, but Kamala Harris's husband, the second man, was the guest of honor in Hollywood for a debate watch. And during and at the conclusion of the debate, apparently Rob Reiner, meathead from All in the Family, was absolutely losing it, screaming, "We're going to lose, we're going to lose, we're going to lose." And Jane Fonda was in tears at publicly at a debate watch. And it was attended by Gretchen Whitmer and Governor Pritzker from Illinois and several other prominent people. And I just got to believe somebody in somewhere around Biden must know that this is a freaking disaster. And I just read, by the way, this is breaking news this morning. Joe Biden might be asked by 25 House Democrats to step down. As that number gets larger, especially since that number largely overlaps with the DCCC frontline House Democrats, the vulnerable Democrats that need to raise money and are worried about their reelections. Val Hoyle's one of them, and I think Andres Salinas is. I'm not sure, but they are starting to feel like he's going to take them all down. That's a significant thing because if this goes to a vote of Congress, you need Republicans plus some Democrats to probably make that happen. Yeah. And you would have the votes.
100%. So actually, as you were talking, I did think of another fundraising idea for the Biden campaign and the Democrats. When you were talking about that debate watch party with all the Democrats crying, I would pay for money if you had like a peanut gallery above that where I could sit and just watch all these Democrats just cry at a debate watch. Like I would buy a ticket to watch that live.
The facial expressions, yeah.
Yes, I would. You could also bottle up their tears and sell them to me. Like I'd take that as well.
I would even go so far as to say it's like when you have people holding watch parties during the World Cup or the Super Bowl, and then they go to like some bar, someplace in the home country or home city of one of the main competitors in that like the World Cup final or the Super Bowl, and they show all these people. I think we should add to this the reaction when things happen in the press conference or a future debate. Will there be a future debate? Let me ask that. I think it's September, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're the Trump campaign, you want another one. If you're the Biden campaign, I mean, you kind of almost have to do one to show that the first one was a fluke, was one-off or a fluke. Yeah. If Biden is saying no to debates in September, they're in deep trouble. I just don't think you can do that. I mean, you saw Trump say no to one debate in 2020. I don't think that did Trump any favors then. This would be worse than that because that was kind of over like rules and, COVID mandates and like, the COVID restrictions for the debates and that sort of stuff. So like there was some different messaging. If Biden's not going to a debate, it's because they're afraid and voters and viewers will know this. If he doesn't go, it's because they're afraid he'll lose. That's the only reason he would go.
But isn't it also an indication of desperation under the circumstances and given the risks, an indication that things are not good if he begs for a debate and Trump's up by 10 points?
Well, I don't think you'll necessarily see him beg for a debate. I mean, because I mean this debate that we just had last week was pretty unprecedented. It's usually just after the conventions you have the presidential debate commission we'll do the 3 debates. I think it's 3 debates with the presidential candidates and 2 debates with the vice presidential, or it might just be
1 or 2. Yeah.
So those have always kind of been around for, I think, since the 70s, maybe, or early 80s, if I recall.
80s. Yeah.
So those are scheduled and being planned right now, right? So if you're Biden, I don't think you ask for more than that. I think you hope that you can survive that, like kind of like figuratively and literally at this point.
Yeah. And also, if they are trailing so far behind, I think the money question actually might be one of the biggest ones, because if he trails so badly, if he can't recover fundraising wise from the situation, and he's heading into the late August Democrat convention, that's when they're going to think long and hard about what to do, because you can't trail by hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. I know he gets a bunch of free media from the media, but that media is sort of turned against him. And the other problem is the focus has shifted away from Trump to Biden. They always wanted to make this election a verdict on Trump, and that Biden would just be assumed to be this reasonable guy, well-meaning guy who's doing his level best and struggling with these issues, but trying to do stuff about it and had talking points for all of it. And now this election's become, as I think it should be in many respects, a verdict on the current sitting president, which is what often these elections are, except that he might be mortally wounded. Now, let me ask you this. I know it's hypothetical. What about the scenario of who replaces him? And I know the how is up in the air, but let's just say that it goes to that, and we have several different options. What's the best option, assuming that for some reason somebody, Obama, Pelosi, and Schumer all go into his office and say, that's it, you're done, and you have to step down, and he says, okay.
It's a good question. I think it depends on your definition of best, right? I mean, if you are logistically, I think, in terms of what is the easiest transition and like who is the most sensible person, it would be your vice president. It would be your vice president, right? So Kamala Harris, under a specific definition of the word best, may be the best replacement for Biden, right? It's the least number of complexities and
less hypocrisy, maybe.
That sort of stuff. Now the problem is she's not necessarily the best when it comes to how she's polling. There are other Democrats that poll better. So if the definition of best is, well, which Democratic candidate gives us the best opportunity to win, that's probably when you start looking at some of the Democratic governors out there, or you look at some Democratic U.S. senators, or you look at like I know Democrats have like Pete Buttigieg's name has been bandied about a little bit. Now the pro is that these Democrats and these potential replacements are less unpopular, right? They are not branded by being part of this Biden administration that's been terrible for a lot of different reasons. Buttigieg obviously would have a little bit on him, but I think he escapes it a little bit just because he's more cabinet, less like he's not the VP. But the disadvantage they have is that a lot of these folks, whether it's like a Gavin Newsom or a Gretchen Whitmer or any of these other governors, is that they might be relatively well known in their state, but they're not well known nationwide. So now it's like you have to start from scratch. Like these are folks that could, in theory, be running for president in 2028 or 2032. They have a big future ahead of them in Democratic politics, but they're having to kind of launch that now, and not do the years and years of like building their name and their brand. And it's very hard to do that in just a few months while also trying to convince voters to vote for you. So there's, if someone were to say Gretchen Whitmer or Gavin Newsom is the best choice for replacing Biden, if we come to that, there is some logic to that I agree with. If someone were to say it's Kamala Harris, there's some logic to I agree to it too. Ultimately, I think what Democrats are faced with are a bunch of bad options, right? Whether it's keeping Biden, going with Kamala, going with a governor somewhere, none of these are good options. None of these are great. So what Democrats have to do now is they have to choose the best of a bunch of bad options.
The only option that's being discussed that was discussed and shot down a ways back, especially right after the State of the Union speech, the Old Yeller speech from Biden, where it wasn't a great State of the Union speech. It was really a campaign speech, but it reassured people that he had what he needed, stamina-wise, functionality to be the nominee. That's when the questions kind of receded. Was Michelle Obama. And I just saw that there's a poll, which is not surprising, that if she were the Democrat nominee, they say she would beat Trump based on how things are today. And of course, she could largely wash her hands of all the problems that have been inflicted by Biden. But also she would ride the Obama popularity. And the only thing about her is I just don't think she wants the job and would not be good at it. She would be another person that would have to be heavily handled. But then she'd have Barack there to kind of do most of the, like, he's going to be the chief of staff or whatever, right? That's kind of how it rolls. And so what do you think about that scenario?
Look, I think a Michelle Obama candidacy would be probably the most interesting of all of these. I also probably think it's the most unlikely of them.
Yeah.
I think if you're Michelle Obama, like you're living a pretty good life right now, getting back into politics. And you know, she's obviously been on the stump for her husband, the former president. She's never been a candidate herself. That's a bit of a different beast. And you know, it's something you really have to want to do personally. So I'm not sure. It'd be.
I don't think she liked being first lady very much, actually, in many ways, is what I understood.
I mean, I think there was some reporting back the day on that fact. I don't know that she necessarily enjoys the limelight. A lot of people don't. It's one of the reasons. I mean, there's a lot of reasons I will never run for office. One of them is that I kind of like my anonymity. And that's a very human thing to have. And maybe Michelle has some of that. It would definitely be the most game changer of all the potential choices that Democrats have. But again, it's still not a good choice. It is the wife of the former president of the United States who didn't necessarily leave in a very popular way, right? It's one of the reasons that Trump got elected in 2016 in the first place. And it kind of speaks to this sort of oligarchical structure that Democrats have. In 2016, the Democrat nominee was the wife of the former president. In 2020, it was, Joe Biden, who's been in Democratic politics since around the time we put a man on the moon. Then now you've got Michelle Obama as your next person, who is the wife of the former. Like, it is, they're not doing much to grow their party, and I have a feeling that you're going to see some tension within the Democratic Party because of that, where the grassroots base isn't going to feel that they're being heard or spoken to or taken care of in any way. So it'll be interesting to see, for sure.
Well, a CNN poll, vast majority of voters think Democrats have a better chance at winning if Biden replaced. So there's that pressure. This was an interesting report when you were talking about Joe Biden. White House staffers reportedly scared shitless, as it says here, of erratic Biden, tiptoe around isolated president during briefings. Not a pleasant person to be around. Which this has been heard before, that he, like when the Robert Hur thing came out saying that he was an old man with a poor memory, which got him from not being prosecuted technically for what he did before he was president, doing what they have tried to convict Trump of. And when he had no right to actually have top secret documents in his possession of any kind, he wasn't a former president. He was a former vice president and a former U.S. senator or chairman of like a committee. He apparently flew into some kind of rage at his aides because he's like, well, how dare they say that about me and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And it's like, now it's totally obvious why Hur said that.
Right.
But apparently they can't have frank discussions with the people who are supposed to be guiding both the White House, and then I think it's probably very true of the campaign as well, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. So it's a mess.
They're sort of trapped.
And I'll say this: I love it. I love watching Democrats just fall apart. I mean, it's the best reality TV money can buy. So certainly makes my job fun.
Yeah, and it's going to make that convention in August really fun, regardless of whether Biden stays or they're trying to replace him, and they don't know who that's going to be for sure. And then you've got the pro-Hamas protesters. They're going to be out in the streets screaming and protesting about what will no doubt be an ongoing war still in Gaza. It's like you couldn't write a script like this for a movie and have people believe it. They certainly wouldn't write it about Democrats.
Well, maybe I could. Maybe I could. Award media consultant. Maybe I got scripted in like this. But I will say it would take all of my creativity to write this storyline,
just to catch up with reality, right?
Actually, that would be my only fear, is that I could write this script and no one it wouldn't be believable. No one. This is the most nuts thing. I mean, look.
You still think it's the best option for Biden, for them to keep Biden at this point? Is that where you're thinking?
I mean, look, I think that I tend to personally be like, when it comes to making tough choices, like especially when you've got a bunch of bad options, you have to choose the worst one or the best of the worst. I'm a big believer in, like, it usually just makes sense to go with the devil, and sticking with Biden is probably that choice. If you use the 25th Amendment to remove Biden, or if you usurp him in the Democratic convention in some way, shape, or form, you're going to have to deal with You're going to have to deal with a brokered convention. You're going to have to deal with a fractured Democratic Party. You're going to have to deal with a lot of these things that, while you can plan for, are going to be wildly unpredictable.
Yeah.
And what I will say about Biden is that, at least with Biden, you know what your problems are, and you can predict what problems are going to come out because of it. So if I were sitting in that room as a Democrat strategist, like, what do we do? I would probably lean towards keeping him on the ticket, because
you
just know what you're dealing with.
Yeah, the devil you know.
So
what if he picks a better vice presidential option to make him look like, well, even if I don't serve out my term, you're going to get this really super awesome person instead of Kamala Harris if I don't serve out all 4 years. So please vote for me anyway.
Maybe, but I'm not sure. But I'm not sure that he gets much of an upgrade by having a Newsom or a Whitmer or a Buttigieg as VP over Kamala. I don't see how that necessarily helps him win a general election over Trump, right?
No, that's right.
Because that's kind of what Kamala was supposed to be in the first place. It was this kind of young, energetic U.S. senator from California that was kind of waiting in the wings in case something happened, right? That was ready to be president on day one. Who's going to do a better job of that than Kamala does? I mean, she's obviously a terrible public speaker. She's not a great campaigner, but in terms of that biography, like, I don't know that you get more from somebody else.
Yeah. Wow. Well, we've hit all the treetops here. We didn't get to any of the SCOTUS stuff because there's been this momentous stuff from the last week, but this is enough to fill a full show here. And any last thoughts that you want to share with folks as we head?
No, I was going to say, it's a crazy week when, like, you talk for an hour about politics, and, like, during SCOTUS rulings, and you can't even talk about them. Like, you're
historic SCOTUS rulings.
It's another one of those weeks where it's like, feel like we're living in history. So, pay attention. This stuff doesn't happen that often. Certainly first in my career.
Yep. And maybe it's a carpe diem moment for many candidates running for other offices to jump in and seize the moment, which we'll see what happens with that. If 25 Democrat members of the House come and say, please step down, I think just about every other member of the House, Democrat member of the House, and every candidate are going to be asked the same question.
Yep. 100%.
Couldn't happen to a nicer party.
That's
well,
right.
Thanks, Dave, for joining us here today. And I really appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time to be on. And this is going to be fun. And who knows, in a month, we may have something even more interesting to talk about, if that's possible.
As always, pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yep. Thanks, Dave. And thanks to all of you for watching. And please share this show with everyone you can. We'll be back with another episode of The Captive Audience on Friday. And tonight is a doubleheader. So you're going to get to hear from Sonny and Don. And you're also going to hear from myself and Dave. You can't ask for more. And by the way, happy 4th of July, happy Independence Day, everyone. And let's celebrate this nation, and then let's go save it.